Hey, how are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay? Is
I
everything all
can.
right?
Yeah, can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yeah, yeah. Everything's
Awesome.
good. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm so excited to chat.
It's my pleasure.
Yay, cool. Well, for anybody that just got in here, this is Culture Calls. It's an interview series that the City of Brampton's Cultural Services office has been running for 4 weeks. So this is the last week, which is, I was just saying, is so wild that we've been like virtually doing this for so long. Yeah, but we've been interviewing different creatives every Tuesday and Thursday. So some folks that live in Brampton right now, others that have spent time here and have like ties to the city just to find out like how they're doing, get familiar with their art, and just like introduce different creatives to different people. So today we have our flex. I'm so excited to chat, like I said. Yeah, at the start of every culture calls, I've been kind of kicking it off with the land acknowledgement. So I'm going to get into that. Um, so for folks that are in Brampton, like me, we're on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and before them, the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Huron, and Wendat. And today in Brampton communities, there's also many First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other global Indigenous people that call Brampton home. So they're very much a part of our communities today as well, not just in the past. I think that's really important to remember. And I've been also starting each culture calls with an Indigenous artist that I would recommend that people listen to. So today I wanted to recommend Tanya Tagak, she's performed at the Rose a couple times, so maybe she's like a more familiar name in Brampton. But she's she like in, she's sorry she's a throat singer as well. I don't know why I'm tripping over my words today. It's like side effect of like week 4 maybe, but she's like a really cool singer. And something I found out recently is she's really funny on Twitter. Like I never really noticed, but and I don't know, maybe it's just like these days she's more active on Twitter because everyone's just like looking for things to do, but she's really funny actually. So yeah, if you want to laugh, you should like follow her on Twitter as well, not just her music. But yeah, that's kind of how I've been kicking off all of the culture calls. And I usually post like a song or something of every artist that I talk about. So if you're not familiar with Tanya, don't worry. But yeah, so today we're talking with our Flex. Do you want to introduce yourself for folks that might not be familiar?
Yeah, sure. At first, I want to say Tanya Tagak is awesome. Saw Tanya in London. She performed at Alien Hall, and it was, I think, the second best, or it's like rivaling. I go back and forth, second best or best concert I had ever been to. It was a whole experience.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, I've been trying to kind of like connect my Indigenous artists with like the artists that I'm interviewing. So it's more helpful. So it's like perfect when people have like stories like that. And yeah, it's like perfect.
So yeah, I'm Flex. I'm an R&B pop electro artist who resides in Toronto, but also has a home in Brampton. Yeah, and I have like frank storytelling, but I like to make pops.
Yeah, it's good. I love bops. And can we talk a little bit about Brampton? Like, you have to go into like super personal details, but like, have you lived here as a child or like more later in life? Like, what's your ties to the city?
I came here when I was 12 years old, and it wasn't what it is now. Brampton has built up so much. I
Mhm.
came here when it was bush, um, when there wasn't really much around and there was no Zoom. But
Yeah.
I ended up going to, right, those days, I ended up going
Mhm.
to Wheatfield for music. And
Mhm.
there I then honed in on a lot of my vocal skills and got into jazz and classical, and found folks who really liked R&B and pop and dance music, and went from there.
That's so interesting. There was like somebody else that was on here earlier, Siddhartha, who I was just like casually like, oh, like tell me about your time in Brampton. And they're like, yeah, I went to performing arts school in Brampton and it's like profoundly influenced my music. And I was like, oh, cool. Who would have thought? So that's like so fun to hear that you went to Mayfield and had those experiences. Um, and I also wanted to ask you about your name. Like, what does Arflex mean? Like, what is the story behind that?
Our flex came because my birth name is Ryan.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to kind of make my name into a command of sorts. So I really like electronic beats and mixing it up and getting to sing over them. And in hip hop, there's a term called flexing, right? So it's like when you
Mhm.
flex on someone, you're kind of showing off your skills or your status or whatever. And so for me, it's really my talent. And so it is Ryan Flex. So it's like, do your thing, flex on them.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And when I was like doing a little, I guess, like research before this interview, I kept seeing another name pop up as well in like brackets, or like one of these names would be in brackets and the other would be like what's being referred in like whatever I was reading. But can you tell me who Zimbul is? Sorry, let me know if I'm
Yeah.
pronouncing
Yeah, Zumba Fakara. So that was a name that came about when I started doing a party with a friend in Toronto, and it
it.
was meant to be a post-colonial, queer positive, black positive space. And so I wanted my presence to be a symbol, so a symbol of the space. And the Fakara part goes, it's an acronym for formerly known as Ryan Anthony. So yeah, so that's where the name came about.
And how do you use them now? Because I know because I know you're also a contributor on Yo Homo, and I'd love to talk about that in a little bit. But it, like from what I can see, it feels like Arflex is the artist and Symbol is like the writer.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Arflex is more, I think, who you see on stage, who you interact with online.
Mhm.
Whereas Zimbal, I think, is more kind of like the person backstage working on these things and doing
Yeah.
the writing and being the historian, being the critic, being I try to be funny on socials, but
Yeah. And
so
is
yeah,
it
that's
kind of
wonderful.
is it sort of like an alter ego or
I guess so. I mean, it's kind of like an alter ego. Um, Also, some people know me as Zimbal, so it's definitely something where if I feel safe with you, I'll
Mhm.
put that name there. Whereas, like, I don't really like using my government name. Ryan
Yeah.
is so.
Yeah, my name's Samantha, so I feel you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like everybody's a Ryan or Samantha, so it's nice to have something else.
Yeah, something else, something where, and also I'm really into self creation, so making yourself.
Mm.
At some point, your parents gave you the name that you have, but you get to a point where you decide who you are and what you want to be. And I think Zimbal does that.
Yeah, cool. Um, and I think more of our conversation today will be about music and performing, but I did want to touch on Yo Homo because I think it's such an amazing platform. And yeah, just if you want to maybe tell us a little bit about what it is and what you do. I know you have like you put out a piece recently on Little Richard, so I know you're like still doing that. So I'd love to touch on it a little bit.
Yeah, Yo Homo is an events page where we log all the Toronto queer events that are happening. We also throw parties and get contributors. So folks who are writers, folks who are DJs, we like to do artist profiles. We like to get them doing playlist, anything that is a hot topic or something that's really interesting. We like to touch on that. So Yo Homo is just like a really fun, great, positive space for queer folks.
Yeah, and I think I saw you. You mostly cover events that happen in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Yo Homo's also on ISO radio, so it's cool to see there's like the print stuff and then also that kind of like live stream radio aspect as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
all your
I love it. I did radio back when I graduated from Fanshawe radio program, I think in what, 2014, 2015. So it's
Mhm.
really dope to come to Toronto and be a part of a magazine that wants to do radio work. So I
Yeah.
jump on here and there. And yeah, it's
Oh,
really great.
cool. Yeah. And so now that you mentioned that you were in radio, is that kind of how you thought you'd be involved in the arts scene? And like how did singing, come? Like I know you went to Mayfield. So I'm just like curious, like what happened between like radio and then like putting out music and doing what you do now.
The ultimate goal is to work for CBC.
Mhm. Yeah, good to know.
And do a really dope show featuring local talent
Yeah.
and queer folks, trans folks, etc. I made the jump. Um, Basically, I was straddling both worlds. I was at the time doing radio and picking the songs I wanted to play, and that really inspired me. So I was listening to Kalela, Leaf, Tanaje, Mr. Wallace, a bunch of artists that were coming out of the blogosphere, and I was
Mhm.
like, I can do this.
Yeah.
And then I made our flex and started recording. And so I think the next venture for me would be like DJing in terms of getting those mixes done. But
Yeah.
that's how I see radio and music and artistry kind of coming together because they all kind of influence each other. I love when I'm in the club and I hear this mix of a song that I've never heard before, and I'm like, oh my God. And it's like a blip, you know what I mean? You hear
Yeah.
it and almost never again. But it for that moment it's like everything and eternal. And that's
Mhm.
what drives me to do what I do.
Yeah. I think it's good to have like different forms of expression. Like you can have the radio and the writing and the performing and just like express different parts of, I guess, like your creative energy. So it's always nice
Absolutely.
to like talk to people that have their hands in like a lot of different things and like will be having their hands in more things in the future. So I will keep my eye out for that CBC podcast or show.
Okay, you put me
Yeah,
to it.
yeah, I'm holding you to it. Um, and I also wanted to talk about sort of like those sort of creative endeavors now that we're isolating. Like, what, like, how are you, I guess, like to start off, like, how are you doing these days now that we're all home?
I think it's gotten better
Yeah.
in terms of getting used to being at home. I think it was such a shift at first. And the toilet paper fanaticism, never
Yeah.
have I ever in my life thought that that would be a thing. And then,
Mhm.
just trying to grab resources, it was very interesting period. But now I think that things have settled and we're seeing the curve flatten a bit more. I think what was it yesterday, 270 something cases reported.
Mhm.
I think it's calming down, and it would be very interesting to see how people interact again. I'm reading a lot about where music is going to head, and if we're musicians, if we're going to be online a little longer,
Yeah.
because of the places that are closing down and not able to hold the same capacity.
Yeah, that's been like one of my pastimes too, is just trying to figure out like what is my life now.
Yeah,
So, yeah, like what happens to us. And so now that kind of that initial like shock is gone of like, oh, we're here, do you find like, are you creating, like, are you writing, are you recording songs? I know you're performing, and I'm like have a lot of questions about that too, but like generally, like, how is your creative process these days?
Creating is going well. It's fragmented in the sense
Yeah.
that um, I'm recording voice notes. So just
Mm,
song ideas I have. I'm using my phone. It's something I've always done, but now it's taking those voice notes and trying to construct beats under them, and then get an idea of what the production will sound like. So when I get in the studio, whenever that is again,
yeah.
it's just it's just a one-time shot kind of thing. So you get in there and get the track recorded. But it's been really cool. I think for me, because I usually like to go on walks or do things when I am creating, like I don't know what it is, but I think I know what it is, but it's a very heavy
Mhm.
topic. But when I
Cool.
get moving, a lot of song ideas come, or when I'm doing something repetitive, I get a lot of song ideas. So I've been, in the house, if I'm cleaning, I'm like, ooh, there's a melody. Or if I'm walking, I'm like, oh my God, that's a great idea for a voice or something. And so that's how I've
Mhm.
been going about it with me, my producers, and musicians who I'm working with.
Do you find like the sound maybe of like what you're creating now is a little bit different just because of like you're in like a different circumstance right now? Do you think it changes anything?
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because it's like I'm kind of vibing with what other folks are vibing with. So I do think right now, more specifically, my tunes have gone a little bit like softer,
Mm,
um, a lot more like gentle and uh, I think contemplative. That's what I've found. Whereas like maybe music I was making before was more, at least while I'm in my creation process, confrontational, edgy,
mhm.
things that I do like to listen to. So I'm really gauging right now. What I am creating and what's coming to me, and picking those things out and being like, "Huh, that's interesting that I wrote that."
Yeah. And I know when you're not creating, you're performing, and you've done a couple different virtual performances. Like I think you've done Club Quarantine a couple times, and I've seen you do Tika Circle. So I'd love to talk about like how do you find performing virtually? Like, what is that experience like for you?
It is very different and at once very the same.
Mm.
And I say different because there's no audience around me, but the idea that I get to use a camera and manipulate it to how I want to be seen or what I want my setting to look like. Like, I can make a
Mm.
stage from my bathroom. You know what I mean? Like, whether
Yeah.
it's completely minimal or, you know what I mean? Over here. Okay, great.
Right.
Yeah, so if you want any of those things, you can make it happen. Right now, I'm
Mhm.
working on a performance for Every Seeker, which is a festival out in Nova Scotia, and I am getting all the beer bottles that I've saved during the time period and turning them into candles with artists who I love as the label. So I get to do sort
Mhm.
of art installation stuff that I always want to do on stage, but sometimes don't have the space to.
Oh, that's really cool. And I think that festival that you just mentioned, I think they're announcing their lineup soon. So I'm assuming you
Yes.
can't see just yet, but keep an eye out. That's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's
Yeah, I'm
exciting.
performing May 22nd,
Okay, cool.
7th. So if y'all want to save the date, save it. It's gonna be a time.
Hmm. Yeah. Mm, and when you did Or actually, I'd love to talk about Tika's Circle really quick. I missed it, but I just like really love what Tika's doing. So I wanted to ask about that experience as well, because I think everybody like Club Q is just viral now. Like everybody, I think like kind of knows what it's about. But I wanted to kind of chat about Tika's Circle really quick. How was your performance
Yeah.
there?
So my friend Denver in the comments says dental realness
I knew I'd do
because
that. I was laughing.
I performed in a bathtub. I got in my parents' bathtub,
Mhm.
and performance of Chris Isaac's Wicked Games and one of my songs, Midnight. And Tika Circle is a really great space because it's for artists. It's really intimate. You do a interview with Tika, and you just do whatever it is that you do. And I think, my performance was a bit of a shift from some other performers. Got in the bathtub, put on some lipstick with a mirror in front of my face, kissed it, showed it to the screen, uh, had on some shades, and then, at the end, like, finished with a gasp,
Yeah.
and those are things that you really get to do in an intimate setting, whereas, on a big stage, there's a lot more production value that goes into doing something like that. So I find for me, like, I kind of get to thrive in the sense of how I play with the stage and how I make it a
Mhm.
performance. So this is, yeah, I love Tika Circle. I love what Tika's doing. And I love getting the opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah. Do you think that those kind of like virtual performances or parties will exist even after like when we can go to clubs and like venues? Do you think that's something that'll just stick around just now that it's
I
here?
really hope they do. I really hope they do. I think because for the first time, I think for a lot of people, we're seeing people who are living with disability, whether invisible or
Yeah.
visible, are able to come to these platforms and do what they do. I know for me, I have sleep apnea. I'm insomniac, and so I'm not always able to go out because my energy levels are so low. But I could definitely turn on the camera and just pop my
Yeah.
head up and look for an hour or two. And so that's something that I'm really hoping does continue. I don't know who's going to run it. I don't know how long it's going to continue for. But I think in terms of a future that is more inclusive, um, that we should continue those spaces. I would love to see that.
Yeah, that's a really good point around accessibility because like also like a lot of the venues, a lot especially like DIY venues, they're either like completely accessible because that's what the vibe is, or it's just like too underfunded to ever get there. And yeah, so I think yeah, I think that's like really important and a really good point that you brought up.
Thank you.
What else did I want to ask you? Um, yes, so we wanted to talk a little bit about mental health during this time as well. So I don't want to forget that. And um, one question I wanted to kind of start to get the ball rolling, I guess, is how how did you find kind of this like sudden, how do I say this? Like all the gigs that we had just like vanished like overnight. And I feel like that's, like when you work for something or like kind of secure gigs that you've really dreamt of, that's hard. That's a like hard reality to face. So like I know for me, I was just like I woke up that one day with like my inbox of like, oh cool, no income. That's
Yeah.
great. And it was not like a fun time. So I was just wondering like how was that experience for you? And like how was it kind of accepting that reality, I guess?
So at first, it was a bit daunting, having to turn to government assistance, at a time where I really thought, oh my God, this is going to be my year in terms
Yeah.
of festivals, right? And I'm really trying to become more of the part of the festival circuit. And I was really hoping to finish some records and get them out this year. And so that's been a major challenge. But I do want to say some festivals like Luminato, which I was going to be a part of, the Pride Festival, Every Seeker as well, turned their approach around and saw that folks were using Zoom, using IG Live, and reached out and found a way to pay me and other artists. I still haven't gotten a check, just so we know, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
That's a good part to mention.
Right? But at the same time, it was really good to see, artists or festivals being accommodating in that way, and also to see these online gigs pop up. So, as you mentioned, Club Quarantine and Tika Circle, Glad Day is also doing something in Toronto, and trying to figure out how to get artists to perform for them. So that's something that I'm also grateful for. So it's a mixed bag, like a Selena Gomez album.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Is there any like resources or like any kind of self-care practices that you've been doing that's like helped you during this time?
Sleep.
Yeah.
Sleep's a big one. Exercise has been great for me. When I can do it and I have the energy. Also, I do my own warm-ups. So my vocal warm-ups, it's been a routine for me, just to keep my eyes on the prize and also to continue writing. Some other things, I've meditated more. I got myself a weighted blanket. Yeah, yeah. It's definitely, it's helped a lot in terms of, the anxiety of sometimes going to bed and not feeling uncertain. And then it's like having this weight on me. I'm like, well, I guess that's it for today. So that's something. So really, like, taking care of my spaces has been a big thing, and making sure that I'm staying with a certain routine. And writing has been really great for me in terms of, figuring out my emotions and talking to people online, talking to my friends, and keeping up in that regard.
Yeah, I find like a lot of mornings I'll like wake up and I'm just kind of like chilling, and then there's this like wave of like this reminder that I'm like, oh, I'm in my house because I have to be, and it's just like very strange. You just kind of I find it's weird when you kind of get used to things and you forget, and then it's like this sudden like reminder, or, like reality check. So I'm always curious to know how people are dealing with everything that comes with isolating and this time.
Absolutely. I'm actually looking into getting some therapy too, because I'm like, you know what, this
Yeah,
may be the time.
yeah, definitely. Like yeah, I think that's a great idea. I've also contemplated the same thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I think one thing about how things were before, I really, you sometimes your mental health isn't great,
Yeah.
but you can't really address it because you're on the clock. For me, I work night shifts, so from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m., and then I don't get home until
Mhm.
almost 4. By the time I wake up and I do what I have to do, eat and exercise and read and whatever else, it doesn't really give me much time to be like, oh, let me contact like 10 therapists to be like, hey, do you have a spot available? Can we meet? But I think now is the time where that's possible. And so for folks who are looking for therapy, online therapy, it's happening. Get yours.
Yeah, and I think another thing that I think about too during quarantine is like we're literally, for the most part, just like alone with our thoughts. Like there's not much to
Yeah.
do in terms of distractions. So I think it's like before we had all of our distractions, for better or for worse, like productivity that kept like it was just a distraction. Whereas now it's like, what do you do to like when that happens? So I think that's another like personal like push for me is like, yeah, you can't like avoid it almost.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting some of the thoughts that pass by. I know for me that's also been a struggle where it's like sometimes we're having these nightmares and I'm like, where is this
Mhm.
coming from? But in the pandemic, yeah, that's where it's coming from. It's like literally all those things coming to a halt. So absolutely.
Cool. Well, our time unfortunately is up, but I wanted to end off just on one more question. I've been asking everybody, like how can we as a community, and that can mean different things like arts community, Brampton, whatever that means for you, like how can we support you as an artist? I've been asking people to plug like their band camps or their like merch that's available or whatever. Yeah, just like how can we support you?
So for me, Bandcamp is the way to go. They only take 20% of my shares. I think 15%, as opposed to Apple Music, which takes 30, and Spotify, which pays a fraction of a penny for every stream.
Wow.
Yeah, so Bandcamp, if you want to hit my PayPal, paypal.me slash flexrflex. That's something that can be done as well. I'm so happy. I know Denver's in the chat. Want to shout out Denver for some support. And, that's the way. And if you see me performing, if you catch me on Every Seeker or you catch me on Glad Day and you're like, that was amazing, shoot me some money then.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Well, I'm really glad that we got to chat because I met you like really briefly, like years ago. I was DJing somewhere and you came by and you're like, I love Kalela. Like, thank you so much for playing that. And I was like,
Yes!
this is a friend. This is good omen. But yeah, and I
Absolutely.
think I was with someone that was from Brampton that was like, I feel like I know that person. Like maybe we went to school together or something. And I was like, okay, making a note that maybe our flex is from Brampton. So yeah, I'm glad that we got to like connect beyond that like very nice comment one day. And like got to like know each other. And yeah, I'm like really I'm really happy with our conversation. I feel like we dove into like lots of difficult conversations. Just kind of, I don't know, that's like hard between strangers on live. So
Yeah,
thank you for
absolutely.
sharing.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Sweet. Well, I don't want to keep you for too much longer. So I'm going to say bye now. And thank you everybody for tuning in. This chat has been hilarious and very, very nice. I've been reading everything. I never know how to interact with the chat while things are happening, but I just wanted to say that thank you for saying stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll talk to you later. Thanks
Talk
again.
to you soon. Thank you
Bye.
so much. Bye.